Good afternoon. Welcome to the webinar organized by SSS Europe. My name is Jia Xu. I'm a business coordinator at SSS Europe, and I'm responsible for Taiwan's chemical registration regulation and the preparation of Taiwan office. Today's webinar includes three parts. In the first 50 minutes, I will talk about the amendment on Taiwan's chemical regulation that published last year. The second part of today's presentation, Bianca will give us a brief update on Brexit. And then, Siron will give us an update on Poison Central notification. This presentation will be closed with a Q&A session. You are welcome to write down your questions on the right column. Okay, let's start with Taiwan's chemical regulations. In the next 50 minutes, you will learn the latest update of the revised TCC-SCA, the Toxic and Concerned Chemical Substance Control Act, and the practical issues regarding registration, such as who should register and the scope of exemption. Then I will move on to registration timeline, type of registration fee, and annual report. To know how these changes will affect non-Taiwanese manufacturers, we also include a session on third-party representative and joint registration. This presentation will be closed with a Q&A session. If you have any question regarding Taiwan's chemical registration, please feel free to write down your questions during the presentation or later. Okay. The main chemical regulation law in Taiwan is the Toxic Chemical Substance Control Act. This act was implemented in 1986, and it has been revised 7 times over the past 30 years. The latest revision was January 2019, last year. The act was renamed into Toxic and Concerned Chemical Substance Control Act, TCC-SCA. And Taiwan's EPA also modified regulations on chemical registration. The competent authority in charge of chemical management in Taiwan is the EPA. The EPA established a branch office in 2016 called Toxic and Chemical Substance Bureau, TCSB, to take care of chemical substance registration and harmonization with international regulations on chemicals. From January 1st this year, the majority of articles in the TCC-SCA has been implemented. 3 major changes are a clear timeline for Phase 1 registration and an announcement of 106 PECs priority existing chemicals for extended registration and an introduction of annual report. I will give more details of each of them later. Okay, so who should register? According to Taiwan's EPA, only Taiwanese manufacturers and importers have the responsibility to register. If companies due to confidential business information, they can appoint a third-party representative, TPR, to register. All manufactured or imported chemical substances need to be registered, except those listed in Article 4 in the regulation of new and existing chemical substance registration. These include substances which occur in nature, inseparable intermediates from chemical reactions, articles, and etc. Items that are regulated by other regulations, such as pesticides, fertilizers, cosmetics, tobacco products, etc., are also exempted from chemical registration. According to the amended TCC-SCA in 2019, companies that manufacture or import existing chemical substances for more than 100 kilograms for the first time will need to register within 6 months from the date of import or manufacture. And this is called the Phase 1 registration in Taiwan. Registrants of those who manufacture or import less than 100 kilograms are also allowed to register, and this was not possible before the amendment. After acquiring Phase 1 registration number, manufacturers or importers who have manufactured or import for more than 1 ton per year, and the manufacture or import chemicals happen to be listed in the 106 pack list, then companies will need to do standard registration. There are 2 types of deadlines for standard registration, depending on when the company obtained Phase 1 registration number. If the company obtains Phase 1 registration number before 2020 and the manufactured or import amount is more than 1 ton but below 100 ton, then the deadline is by the end of 2022. If the tonnage is more than 100 ton, then the deadline is 2021, next year. If a company obtains Phase 1 registration number for the first time after 2020, and the manufactured or imported tonnage is more than 1 ton but before 100 ton, the deadline is 3 years from the second year of registration. Similarly, if the tonnage is more than 100 ton, then the deadline is within 2 years. In the table here, you can see some chemicals that is listed in the 106 pack list. Now we have seen the deadlines for standard registration. So far, Taiwan's EPA only requires 106 chemical substances for standard registration. In the coming years, Taiwan's EPA plans to include more chemical substances in its PACS list, and this is currently in progress under the Challenge program. The standard registration is further divided into 4 categories: Level 1, Level 2, and 3 and 4, depending on the tonnage. Each level is corresponding to different data requirements in the dossiers. Now we will move on to the registration concerning new chemical substances. To know if a chemical substance is listed in Taiwan's inventory or not, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration has established an online platform called CSNN. One can use case number, Chinese name, or English name of a chemical substance to search in this online platform. Now I'll move on to new chemical substances. For new chemical substances, Taiwan's EPA has 3 categories for registration. They are small quantity registration for those less than 100 kg, simplified registration for those between 100 kg and 1 ton, and then standard registration for those manufactured or imported for more than 1 ton. Similar to standard registration of existing chemical substances, here we also have level 1 to 4. For new chemical substances, the EPA has separate regulation if the substances is used for scientific research and development, or process-oriented research and development, or on-site isolated intermediates or polymer. This regulation also applies to polymer of low concern and CMR substances. The registration fee under TCCSCA is listed in this table. Phase 1 registration will cost about $3, and the standard registration will cost about $1,600. For new chemical substances, small quantity registration will cost about $66, and the simplified registration will cost about $660. The standard registration of new chemical substances is the same as the existing chemical substances. For small and medium enterprise, there are 25% discounts. The amendments of TCC-SCA also introduced annual report, and this applies to both existing chemical substances and new chemical substances. Registrants need to report quantity and type of chemical substances between April 1st and September 30 every year. Now I will talk about the roles of a TPR, third-party representative. As I mentioned earlier, only Taiwanese manufacturers or importers can register. Non-Taiwanese manufacturers cannot directly register. However, they can appoint a TPR to be on behalf of them. This appointment requires communication between foreign manufacturers and Taiwanese importers. TPR needs to have notarized or certified appointment letter from Taiwanese importers. To briefly summarize what a TPR can help you, first of all, TPR can coordinate with downstream users, which is Taiwanese importers in this case. Secondly, companies can apply for disclosure of CBI via TPR. Thirdly, TPR can also help with annual report. In the new regulation, companies that manufacture or import the same chemical substances can apply for joint registration. Joint registration is not compulsory under TCC-SCA. Companies can look for co-registrants via the online platform listed here. However, only companies that have done Phase 1 registration can join this platform. Registrants can jointly submit some chapter, yet data regarding dossier is mostly likely needed to be submitted by individual registrants. Okay, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Jia, for your discussion on Taiwan chemical registrations. Hello everyone, I am Mrs. Priyanka Manapure representing Sustainability Support Services, and today's webinar session would discuss mainly on Brexit. The aim of today's webinar is to discuss on what are the latest updates and what are the implications of Brexit to UK reach. Let us just have a look at what are the current updates of Brexit. The UK government's Brexit bill has passed its first hurdle in the UK Parliament on 12 December 2019, and the Brexit implementation date is now currently set for 31st January 2020. With a majority of 124 votes in the favour of EU Withdrawal Agreement Bill, it will now be further scrutinised in the Parliament. The UK is formally going to leave the EU on 31st January 2020 with a withdrawal deal, and it will then go into a transition period that is scheduled to end on 31st December 2020. So during this transition period, the UK will effectively remain in EU's custom union and as a single market, but it will be outside the political institutions and there will be no British members in the European Parliament. Also, during this transition period, Prime Minister Mr. Boris Johnson's priority would be to negotiate a trade deal with the EU. This is because UK wants as much as possible access for its goods and services to the EU. The EU would take weeks to agree on formal negotiating mandate since all the remaining 27 member states and the European Parliament has to agree on this. This means that the formal talks will only be initiated in March 2020. Post-Brexit, the UK reach would come into effect and all those companies placing chemical substances on the market of UK would have to comply with UK reach regulation. Let's have a discussion on UK reach regulation. We yet have another 10 days before Brexit would be implemented, and currently the UK chemicals industry is regulated through a framework which is largely based on EU legislation. ECA, that is the European Chemical Agency, is the lead body in implementing this framework, and the main piece of legislation is REACH regulation. Post Brexit, the EU REACH regulation will be brought into UK law by the European Union Act of 2018. This means ECA would have no role in UK REACH registrations. Instead, it would be the Health and Safety Executive which would act as the lead UK regulatory authority, and it would enable the registration of new chemicals through a UK REACH IT system. Let us have a discussion on what is the role of an exporter to UK. So once the UK leaves the EU, all the chemical substances that will be brought into UK market will have to be registered under UK REACH. Let us consider two possibilities here. You have already registered your chemical in EU through a UK based only representative. So it is now the responsibility of your UK based only representative to grandfather, that is notify about your EU REACH registration to the HSE. This notification is possible within 120 days of the UK leaving the EU, and because of this you would be able to export your chemical to UK market for another 2 years. But during this 2 years time period, you will also have to register your chemical in UK. The second possibility is that you already have a EU REACH registration with a European entity. So now, this time it would be the responsibility of your EU based only representative to transfer the EU registration to a UK based OR. Registrations held by UK based entities prior to the exit will be legally recognized in the UK REACH system through grandfathering, that is, notification. Before transferring a registration, you will have to consider how this would affect your operations in the EU and your ability to access the EU market. The third possibility is that you have a fresh chemical which you want to now export to UK and it has not been previously registered. So now all the non-UK manufacturers who want to export to the UK market will need to ensure that the substance is registered with the HSE and through a UK based only representative. All those registrations which are made by the UK based OR post Brexit will be classed as new registrations and full registration duties would apply to them. Sustainability Support Services has already set up its UK based OR entity to support our existing and new potential clients to be able to comply with the challenges posed due to Brexit on substances exported to UK. If you are interested in UK REACH compliance activity, you can contact us for further details. So this is all about our discussion on Brexit. Thank you very much for your attention. I request you all to drop in your queries so that we can take those at the end of third webinar session. I now hand over the session to Mr. Srirang Booth. He will briefly discuss on Poison Center notification. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Priyanka. A very good afternoon, all of you. I am Srirang Booth, and I am going to present an update on Poison Center notification in my today's presentation. Basically, these are the outlines of my presentation. I am going to cover today what is Poison Center notification, what is the scope of PCN, what are the obligations within Poison Center notification, what are the different timelines for compliance, how to start preparing notifications, highlight harmonized information requirements beyond the safety data sheet, and this will be followed by Q&A session. You can post your questions in the box right side of the presentation, and we can come back to you with the answers in the following session. What is Poison Center notification? According to Article 45 of the CLP regulation, companies placing hazardous mixtures on the market are obliged to provide the information about certain hazardous mixtures to the relevant national bodies. And these national bodies will make this information available to the poison centers so that it can be available to the citizens or the medical personnel in event of emergency. So as per the Annex 8 of the CLP regulation adopted in March 2017, the harmonized requirements for poison center notifications will be applicable from 1st January 2021 for all the mixtures which are placed into the European market. So what is CLP Regulation Annex 8? So as per Annex 8, harmonization of information requirements of certain hazardous mixtures in all EU member states will be applicable. All the manufacturers who are putting the mixtures into the market, or the distributors or the importers who are putting the mixtures into the market, they have to prepare the data for their mixtures in a harmonized submission format. This format will be submitted to the European Chemical Agency, and this will be accessible to the national agencies of all EU member states. These EU member states will make this information available to the poison centers for the purpose of making an emergency health response. So what are the mixtures that are in scope? So the mixtures which are classified for human health or physical effects are only covered within the poison center notification. The mixture which are classified only for environmental effects, gases under pressure or explosives are not covered within the scope of PCN notification. Also, the mixtures which are used in scientific research and development and the mixtures which are not covered by the CLP regulations are not within the scope of poison center notification. Who has to submit this information? So the importers and downstream users placing the hazardous mixtures onto the market are the primary members who are going to do the poison center notification. So basically the duty holders are importers and downstream users. Distributors are not covered as of now into the poison center notification, but the member states are challenging the role of distributors for placing on the market of the mixtures, and this issue is still open and the discussion is ongoing. But we expect that all who are putting the mixtures into the European market need to do the poison center notification based on their applicable classification. These are the different timelines for compliance for doing the poison center notification. And these timelines are based on the use of the substance. So if the mixture is used only for consumer uses, then the notification deadline is 1st January 2020. If the mixture is used for consumer as well as professional use, then the deadline for doing the poison center notification is 2021. And if the mixture is used only for industrial use, then the notification can be done by 1st January 2024. So these are the transition period for existing products, and it will end on 31st December 2024. And from 1st January 2025, every mixture which is classified, placed into the European market needs to comply with the poison center notification obligation. Earlier, the consumer uses had a deadline of 1st January 2020, which has been extended till 1st January 2021. So how to prepare and what all information are covered within the poison center notification? So there is a special submission format for poison center notification, and it is Euclid compatible, wherein anyone can prepare their notification into Euclid system. It basically needs the submitter details the name, address, which are consistent with the label, and then the product information, like what is the trade name of the mixture, what are the packaging, what are the different uses, what is the color, etc. And then the classification related information of the mixture, toxicological information, compositional details, pH, physical state, etc. There is a unique formula identifier which has been developed by the European Union based on the unique identification number of the mixture along with the VAT number of the company. So there is a special tool to generate this unique formula identifier, which is also known as UFI, so that the mixture can be easily traced within the European market. So each individual mixture will have a separate UFI. UFI makes a link between the product and the submitted mixture information in the poison center notification. So basically, with this information, we are going beyond the safety data sheet and adapting existing or including the new data. Basically, we need to obtain the full composition of the mixture, basically the hazardous component and the non-hazardous component. Normally, the detailed SDS will have this information about hazardous component as well as non-hazardous component, and it will help to establish the improved information exchange within the supply chain. It is more challenging in case of mixture in mixtures because the scenario will be different in MIMS case. So base scenario needs to be generated and the report which should contain about the information of all the mixtures in mixtures. In other cases, possible to use the UFI notified by your MIM supplier, where you can also use their UFI into your mixture to get more detailed information about mixtures in mixtures. Also, toxicological information needs to be reviewed and it can be taken from the section 11 of the SDS. So it's not mandatory that you need to generate the new data, but it is mandatory that you should report the data, whatever is available for the substances into the mixture or directly information related to the mixtures. The product category must be assigned to the product based on its main intended use. For example, dishwashing detergent, adhesives, decorative paints in accordance with the European product categorization system. All submission must also include the information identifying the submitter, the product, like the trade name, packaging, color, and whether the mixture has consumer, professional, or industrial use. In addition, the information on the classification and labeling of the mixture according to CLP regulation also needs to be provided. There are certain exemptions within the product poison center notification, for which you may not need to provide the information on the concentration. The exception can be applied if the components are not classified or classified only for skin sensitization or aspiration toxicity, and their total concentration does not exceed 5% within the mixture. Additionally, generic product identifiers can be used to identify components of mixtures. If they are used exclusively as perfume, fragrance, or coloring agent in mixtures, then there is a possibility to get an exemption for the mentioning those uses. If they are not classified as hazardous to human health and their total concentration does not exceed 5% for perfumes and 25% for coloring agents. Some submissions can contain limited compositional information if the mixture has industrial use only and it has 24/7 phone services provided within the SDS. Once the notification is done, you have to plan the relabeling of your product because as per the new requirements, the UFI is always to be included in the notification as well as on the label or the packaging. No rules on placement or redesign of the label to incorporate this new element. If the product is not packaged or has an industrial use only, the UFI can be included in section 1.1 of the SDS. Printing of UFI on the label should be planned to coincide with the submission of information. So just to give you some take-home messages, start collecting the information related to your mixtures, prepare an inventory of mixtures used in their ingredients, review the SDS for the mixtures, identify the competent person to do the poison center notification, keep a track of changes in process of your product, and keep up to date information from time to time related to all your product. Thank you very much for your time, and now we can have Q&A session.
Thank you, Srirang sir, for your detailed discussion on Poison Center notification. Okay, so now the session is open for your queries. You can drop your queries to the dialog box present on the right hand corner of your screen. We have another 10 minutes to conclude today's webinar session. We'll try to solve most of your queries during this session, and all the answered and unanswered queries will be combined into a FAQ document and released to our clients. Hello everyone, we are still live. I request you again to pour your queries, all your concerns, so that we can take up those Okay, so that's all from today's webinar. We have another webinar in our pipeline, and the details of the upcoming webinar will be shared with you shortly. Thank you very much for your attention. See you until next time. Bye bye.